Management consulting is one of the most sought after careers post MBA. In fact, like 1/3 of all M7 MBA students pursue a career in consulting and choose consulting as their full-time job. Now, this isn't a video about why to go into consulting, but it is a video about the consulting recruitment process. And despite the number of people who go into consulting, it's one of the most convoluted recruiting processes I've ever seen and been a part of. I went through this process 2 times. In my first year, I went through internship recruiting, where I was able to get an internship at Bain in the San Francisco office. And then the second year, I was a management consulting club co-chair, where I helped out the class below me get their internships at different consulting firms.
This is the video that I wish I had before starting my consulting journey.
One of the most common questions is, what should I do before I start my MBA to get started with consulting recruiting? Thankfully, there's some great programs like McKinsey Early Access where you can actually go and do a mini internship with one of the firms. You should take a look at the company websites, see if they offer these programs, and if they do and you're eligible, go ahead and apply. At best case, you're able to get into the program, which typically also comes with a summer internship. Worst case, you're able to network a little bit with firms that are interesting to you, and then you can leverage the network that you're starting to build whenever you go into recruiting upon starting your MBA. If you aren't eligible for these programs, or if you don't think you want to go after them, that's totally fine too. In fact, you don't need to do anything at all before starting your MBA. I want to repeat that. You do not need to do anything before starting your MBA to get started with consulting recruiting. Once you get started with the MBA though, be ready to go, because recruiting picks up very quickly and you're going to have to hit the ground running. Once you start your MBA, make sure you join your school's consulting club. At Booth, it was called MCG, or the Management Consulting Club. And these clubs typically walk you through step by step on how to get a consulting offer, and also prepare you for the interview, guide you through networking, and do so much. All of the co-chairs are extremely passionate about helping you secure an internship that's right for you so that you can move forward in a consulting career.
Once you've joined your school's consulting club, there are 2 things you want to get done really quickly. First is the resume. You want to have a 99% done version of your resume in the standard format of your consulting club, ready to go really early on so that you don't have to worry about it. So just take the content of your resume that you've had from before and port it in to the new format, and then you can make adjustments later on if you need to. Second, and I think more importantly, is to put together your story. Your story is kind of your elevator pitch that you're going to be sharing with your peers as well as firm representatives to help them get to know you a little bit better really quickly. It's a professional history. So for example, my story was about how I faced personal healthcare challenges growing up. That led me to want to go into the healthcare industry, where I joined a biotech company and worked on mRNA cancer vaccines, and then realizing I wanted to have a broader impact on the overall healthcare network instead of just focusing on pharmaceuticals. That's what led me into pursuing consulting in the first place. The most important elements of your story are: why are you doing what you want to do, and how is consulting going to fit in to your future?
Once you have the first version of your story, you're immediately going to start putting it to the test, because very soon coffee chats will begin. Let me break down what a coffee chat is in the best way that I know how. Think of it like professional dating. It's typically a 20 to 30 minute quick introductory meeting where you get to share a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the firm or the type of work, and then also learn from the other person what type of work they're doing. These meetings are typically short, they're quick, and they're an introduction. Right? There may be follow-on meetings where you get to go deeper and start diving into more personal topics like hobbies, sports, other interests. However, it's best to keep your initial coffee chat relatively professional. Focus it on your career so far and what's driven you and motivated you. And then also ask about the other person's experience. These coffee chats are for you as well, to learn about the firm, to learn about that specific person's work and experience at a firm. So you'll get started getting your feet wet with coffee chats, typically with second years first. And I think this is a great way to get started. And it's because the stakes are a little bit lower. You're doing these coffee chats with your peers. That being said, the second years typically have access through some sort of form to let firms know if they think you're a really good candidate or if they had a poor coffee chat with you. So you do want to put your best foot forward. But what I've found is your fellow students typically only will share positive information unless you do really, really terribly. And so put your best foot forward. You want to practice, but you also want to leave a good impression with these second years, who are going to be your biggest advocates and allies throughout the rest of your process. I would recommend doing a few coffee chats, seeing how you feel about them. And then if you feel like you're struggling through these coffee chats, see if you can do a couple more. After 2 to 3 weeks of starting your MBA, you should be done with your resume in like a 99% finalized state. You should have a well-honed and well-crafted introductory story that you can use to start coffee chats off and let people know a little bit about yourself very quickly. And you should start feeling confident and comfortable in your ability to do coffee chats. If you feel like you're lagging behind in any of these steps, you really want to ramp up, start doing coffee chat practice with your peers, your fellow first years, and kind of anyone who's willing to support you and help you out through this process. Because very soon, firms are going to be sending firm reps into your school, and you're going to start using all the skills that you've learned from these peer conversations into coffee chats with the firm reps. Typically, firms will have large kickoffs where they bring in consultants from all over the United States, and this is primarily for US-based schools. There, you can talk to firm reps from different offices, and then you can also meet someone who's very, very important for you throughout the recruiting process. Most firms will have someone called an on-campus recruiter, or OCR for short. The OCR's job is to be your primary initial contact into the firm to kick off your networking. He or she is going to be doing so much for the entire school, and they are typically so passionate about the work they do. So make sure that you are able to get some sort of slot with the OCR. They'll typically send them out through your management consulting club. These slots are typically actually shorter than coffee chats, but they may be a full 30 minutes. In these time periods, what you really want to share is your story, what interests you. You want to share location preferences. And we're going to talk more about this throughout the video. But at this point, you should already have your location preferences narrowed in to 2, maybe 3 areas. If you can hone it into one location, that's wonderful, because what you want to do is tell your OCR, I would really love to speak with a person at this office who has been doing this type of work. So in my example, at that time, I knew I wanted to go to San Francisco. So I told my OCR, hey, I would love to talk to people who have been working on healthcare out of the San Francisco office. And then the OCR was very quick to be able to connect me and give me an initial connection at the office that I was most interested in. Now, OCRs are speaking to everyone interested in consulting at your school. So you should be sure to give them time to make the connections. So if you've spoken with the OCR and it's been maybe 2-3 days and you haven't heard back, that's totally okay. That's totally normal. What I would recommend is after an initial meeting, give the OCR maybe a week to connect you. And if you haven't heard anything back from them by that time, you can shoot them an email, just kindly saying if they have been able to find anyone that they could connect you with. I promise you, they want you to be able to connect and network with the firm, and they are working on it. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to build the right connection and get someone able to speak to you. After making an initial connection with the office and the firm, what you really want to do is get to know the offices and get to know the firms. Through these conversations, you're going to be able to tease out the differences between each of the firms as well as between different offices in the firm. Now, I want to dive into this a little bit more. You're trying to answer a couple of questions for yourself. One, you want to see if there are any nuances between these different firms that mean a lot to you, because you want to make sure you're going to the right firm at the end of the day. And the nuances are more intimate than what you're just going to find online. You're going to figure out the nuances between the firms and the offices by speaking with people. On top of that, if you were interested in multiple locations and got connected to multiple locations, you really quickly want to hone in on a single location for each firm. I think that's the best strategy for success because it lets the firm know exactly where you want to go, and you're not going to be able to kind of hedge your bets with a firm by putting in multiple locations. That's actually going to work to your detriment, in my opinion. One thing you can do is if you like one location for one firm, but a different location for a different firm, and overall you're a little bit indifferent across those 2 locations, you can hone in on one location for the first firm and a different location for the other firm. But as long as you hone in on one location for each firm that you truly, genuinely want to go to, I think you're going to be in great shape. And as soon as you know that information, that's a great time to reach back out to the OCR and let him or her know that, hey, you initially were thinking about these 2 offices, but now you've really honed in on a single office and you want to be going after that office. That really helps the OCR and the firm know how to route your networking and where you want to be going. It's going to help you and it's going to help the firm help you get the job. Okay, one thing I have not mentioned at all so far in this video is casing. Now, when people think about consulting recruiting, that is the number one thing that people usually go to in their heads. I want to get ready to case. I know it's a huge part of the interview. How do I get ready? I haven't mentioned it very specifically so far in this video, and it's because the initial focus on consulting recruiting should absolutely be on the networking piece that we've been working on so far. You want to make sure that you get the interview, and getting the interview requires the networking piece. Then you want to make sure you can crush the interview, and that's when casing comes in. So after quite a few weeks of networking with second years, with firm reps, honing in on location, that's when typically your school will have a large casing kickoff. This is at Booth. It was a large event where lots of people came together. There were practice cases, there were breakout rooms with mini cases, and you got to see an example of what a great case looked like. This event is almost always a little bit intimidating because you get to see what perfection on a case looks like. And honestly, you're not going to be there at the very beginning of your casing prep, and that's totally okay. So after the casing kickoff typically happens, you're going to be in this phase of recruiting where your networking is still ongoing. You're still connecting with people at the firms and having coffee chats with them, but it's starting to come down a little bit. At the same time, your casing is going to be picking up. And so the casing practice after that initial kickoff is going to get started. Here's what I recommend to get good at casing as quickly as possible. After the casing kickoff, you'll typically be given some sort of casebook. The casebook will contain sample cases as well as kind of an outline of how to case, as well as support for specific types of problems within cases. I would highly recommend read through the casebook, especially the support portion, and don't read any of the sample cases. You want to leave all of those blank until you've actually done the case. Now, I would start by casing with my fellow second years. This is when the network that you built within the school, especially during those first coffee chats with second years, is going to be tremendously helpful. I would not recommend you do any cases with other first years initially, and make sure that you're doing those cases with second years because they just went through recruiting process and they know what a good case looks like. So you'll get really good actionable feedback early on. If you start casing with first years right off the bat because you're more comfortable with those set of peers, it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. They don't necessarily know what a great case performance looks like or how to give really good feedback. And so what I did was my first 7 or 8 cases, I did exclusively with second years. And if you're asking how am I going to do these cases with second years, 1, leverage the network that you built. And then 2, this is where the consulting group typically comes in and they provide a lot of support and connection between second years and first years so that you can get your feet wet with casing. Now, after you've done each case, take the feedback, write it all down, and make sure that you go back over the case with the feedback that you got from the second year caser. What you want to do is you want to identify opportunities for growth in each case, identify your strengths and your weaknesses in each case. And then once you've done quite a few of them, then you'll start to see consistently if you're very good at frameworking and poor at the math, or if you're really good at getting started, but you just lose steam towards the end of the case. These types of insights you'll get after doing, 5 to 10 cases. And then you'll really have a good idea of where to focus on with casing. After the initial cases with second years comes what I think is the hardest part about consulting recruiting. This is, once again, when networking is still reasonably high and your casing is starting to ramp up and pick up really quickly. This is the time when I felt most overwhelmed during my consulting recruiting process, and it's mostly because of specific invite-only events that the firms will then put out. Now, these invite-only events are a great indicator that you are doing well in terms of your networking within a firm. However, if you don't get invited to them, it's not the end of the world. Keep networking, keep working. And I know plenty of people who didn't get invited to invite-only events, but did end up getting job offers from the office. After invite-only events, it's time to case. You really want to hone in on your casing capabilities so that you're ready to knock interviews out of the park. Here, what I would recommend is initially to do 3 to 4 cases per week. And after each case, hopefully immediately after each case, you spend at least 1 hour going back through the case. Make sure you read the case, read the feedback that you were given. And at this point, you can start casing with other first years because you'll have a better idea on how to give feedback as a class in general. You want to make sure you're honing in your skills and identifying your weaknesses. And then once you've identified your weakness, you can start to drill in those specific sections. And so your consulting club will recommend different drills, or you can go to office hours with your co-chairs or seek out the support of a second year to get feedback on how to drill. However, what I would recommend here is just make sure you're honing your skills, because come time for the interview, you want to knock the cases out of the park. In the middle of casing prep, you will eventually have what's known as the resume drop and application phase. This is when the application deadlines for different firms are actually coming in. And so here, you typically are just dropping in a resume. If you didn't network very much at all with a specific firm, but realized you want to apply to that firm and a cover letter is optional, then I would recommend writing a cover letter. But otherwise, if you've networked with the firm and they have a good idea of who you are, what feedback I've gotten from the firms is you don't generally need to worry about the cover letter. So after completing the application, some firms have what's known as like an online case. And these online cases can vary from a game that you play to an actual virtual case. Treat this like any other case if you do the actual virtual case. It's just a little bit weird through an automated machine. So you just want to go in, almost everyone does it at around the same time, and just do your best performance for whatever that may be. Once you've done all of these applications, you want to go back to your interview prep and make sure you're continuing to case, honing your skills, and also starting to build up your behavioral prep. Now, behavioral questions are questions like, tell me about a time that you led a team or something of that sort. For these questions, I typically recommend go back through your experience in your prior professional life or bring in notable volunteer experience that you've done. Talk about the stories and leverage a methodology like the STAR method or the SOAR method, where you can really tell the story and then talk about the actions that you took and the results that you had. You can look up these methods online, and I'm sure your consulting club is going to walk you through these methods. So be sure that you can frame your stories into the methodologies that come with really good answers in interviews. Also, after you submit your resume or around that time period, firm reps may reach out to you to request to case you as a practice. If you feel confident and prepared about these cases, that's great. It's a great opportunity to put a good foot forward and crush a case out of the water. If you feel a little bit less prepared, then you can consider asking for a little bit more time before you take the case. Generally speaking, it's not the same as an interview. And if you bomb the case, that's not great, but it is a good opportunity if you think you're doing okay at casing to get some direct firm representative feedback to help you actually crush your interviews in the case. And so I think it's a great opportunity to really hone in your casing with firm feedback directly. Firms start getting back on if you got an interview or not in late November into December. This can be a really challenging time, so I really recommend leaning into your support group and your peers to continue to practice in case, and then also celebrate whenever you get good news with really close, well-trusted friends, and also be there as a supporter for your friends as they hear hopefully positive news, but sometimes news that they didn't get an interview invite. At the end of the day, this process is challenging and not everyone gets interview invites at firms that they want to. However, you want to be in the best position to get ready to interview with every single firm that you apply to. So continue to practice, continue to prep in case, and get those behaviorals down, because very quickly holiday season will be coming and you can decide what you want to do at that time. If you feel confident in your interview capabilities at that stage, then take a little bit of time off, but don't get too rusty. Keep the muscles practicing on occasion, but you can tone it down a little bit. If you feel like you need to continue to ramp it up, I guarantee you that there will be people in your support group who are going to be there to support you and help you ramp up casing even into the holidays as your school takes a break. Interviews start almost immediately after the holidays. I think my interviews were started on January 3rd. So be ready to go as soon as the new year runs around. Make sure that your goal is to absolutely crush the case portion of the interview and get ready for the behavioral aspect and be very specific and know how the different firms interview. That's information that you'll get through your coffee chats, through your consulting club, as well as on-campus recruiters. So you should not be surprised by anything except for potentially the actual content of the case. Now, the casers and the interviewers are people who most likely know nothing about you. So all of your networking, everything at this stage has nothing to do with this final step of the process. What you need to do is you need to have the person who's interviewing you step away from that interview saying, I want to work with that person. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is one, absolutely crush the case. At this point, you've done so much practice. Don't let that go to waste at all. And two, connect with the interviewer through the case in a way that makes them excited to work with you. Bring them in, engage them, and make sure that you are able to communicate your thought processes so that they understand how you think. That's what's going to get them to know what type of worker you are and how you think, so they can then recommend you. At this stage, it's the last final stage of the process. Go crush the interview, and then hopefully you can celebrate soon afterwards. Interview season ends at different times for different people, depending on which firms you have interviews with and where you get offers. Typically, the first interviews are at McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, and people who get offers at those firms are very happy to accept one of them. And so interview season can end early for those students. However, I would be cognizant because many other firms are continuing to interview throughout the rest of the month. So throughout that month, be sure that you're continuing to support your peers, be a good friend, continue to case people when they ask you, and celebrate your own victories whenever they come, because this is the last stage of the process. Once you have an offer or a couple of offers in your hand, the firms are going to start reaching out to you to connect, to congratulate you, but also answer any questions that you may have. Use this time to get to know any last questions you have about the firms, although you should have a really good idea at this stage, and make your decision as quickly as you possibly can. The firms have a number of people they're looking to hire, and so the faster you can make your decision, the easier it is for them to figure out who they're going to hire and how many slots they have left. And that way your peers can, get those slots, and you want to be able to support them as much as possible. You're finally done with consulting recruiting. This video was everything I wish I had when I got started, but it doesn't touch on every single nuance of the process. And so if you have any questions, post them down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them, but it's a dynamic process. Everyone has a very unique journey going through consulting recruiting, and that's when you really lean on your peers, you lean on your consulting club, and the rest of the people around you. So good luck with consulting recruiting. I think it leads to great career opportunities, and thank you for listening. Hopefully this video was helpful to you.